What is up, everybody? Corey Hughes Bloody History. We're back. And I'm enjoying the variety of this Jack Ruby file. So we're just going to continue on here. November 26, 63. Jack Leon Ruby. Lee Harvey Oswald - victim. Isidore Silver, 318 East Gaston Street, Savannah, Georgia, on November 26, advised that during World War II, he was bartender for his brother at Bo Peep's Bar and Pool Room in Savannah. Ruby, who was in the Air Force stationed in Savannah for unknown period during the war, frequented the bar and engaged him in conversation frequently. Some period later, Ruby sent him a cigarette lighter as a present. About 1954, Silver went to Chicago with a friend and while there, decided to look Ruby up. He believes he called the novelty business that Ruby and his brother were in, but failed to reach either and was told that Ruby was in Texas. He's had no other contacts or knowledge of Ruby. States Ruby was quiet, didn't drink alcohol, didn't gamble or chase the women. Firmly feels that Ruby was loyal and described him as a good, clean fellow. Knew of no hoodlum or subversive associations. So what is this description we have here? States Ruby was quiet, didn't drink alcohol, didn't gamble or chase the women. Interesting description, isn't it? 1126 to Director SAC, Dallas and Cleveland. Rebutel, November 26 last. Julius Salisbury, interviewed November 26th, advised he did not know and had never met Jack Ruby, a.k.a. Jack Rubenstein. Salisbury said Rubenstein was not known to him through his contacts with various other nightclub operators or gamblers. Stated none of the strip teasers employed by him had indicated they were acquainted with or had ever worked for Ruby. Salisbury commented that although he did not know Ruby and did not know anyone who was acquainted with Ruby, he felt Ruby should be given the Medal of Honor. For other nightclub operators in the vicinity of Salisbury's club also interviewed and denied knowing Ruby. Redacted protect identity stripper at Club Troc, TROC, Baltimore, advises man named Ruby from Texas, allegedly well acquainted with the owner of Mickey's Show Bar in Cleveland, Ohio. Ruby allegedly at Mickey's Show Bar, Cleveland, January 1963. All right, let me screenshot this because this is important. Why is this important? Because Jack Ruby was in Cleveland. And who do we know in Cleveland? Well, of course, the Cleveland mob, right? John Scalish, James the Cavoli, Leo Masseri, Danny Green, head of the Longshoremen Union, 1963. All right, November 27th, SAC, Los Angeles. Robert Lee Shorman, 332 Magnolia Avenue, Long Beach, California, operator of the Peppermint Pike, 3371 West Pike, Long Beach, advised he met Jack Ruby around Christmas time of 1961. Shorman was a musician in the Jan Garber Band, playing other engagements at the time, and would spend his off hours at Ruby's Carousel Bar and nightclub. For a period of approximately 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes helping out in the band at the Carousel. Ruby's background. Ruby told Shorman he was born and brought up in the northwest side of Chicago. In later years, Ruby lived hand to mouth working floating crap games in the Chicago area. Ruby made vague references to leaving Chicago in 1948 for Dallas when things got too hot. An unrecalled source told Shorman Ruby had been dumped in a garbage can and left for dead in Chicago. Upon arrival in Dallas, Ruby changed his name from Rubenstein to Ruby. Yeah, but the question is, why did all of his other brothers do the same? Why did Earl change his name? Why did Samuel change his name? They all did it about the same time. Weird, huh? Hoodlum connections. The only hoodlum connection known to Shorman was a mention of the one time on the part of the Ruby that he had known the brother of John Gallo. The lead alto for the Ralph Martiri Band. Shorman was a musician in the Martiri Band prior to playing for Garber. The brother of John Gallo, name unknown, had several names, one of which was Gallo, and was under indictment in Chicago around 1948 for some unremembered offense. Martiri's recording allegedly were pushed by the crime syndicate, and Martiri received preferential treatment from unions and received engagements because of the syndicate's monetary interest in his earnings. Ruby's police connection. Information police officers, uniform and detective on duty and off, frequented the carousel, and Shorman never saw a police officer pay for a drink. The only police officer Shorman knew by name was an older detective, last name Fritz, whom he saw on one occasion at a table in the carousel. Shorman estimated he saw between 150 to 200 police officers at the carousel at one time or another. However, some of these were identified as police officers because they were associating with known police officers off duty at the carousel. Whenever there was a case of unusual interest in Dallas, Ruby would run down to the police station to find out what was going on. He told Shorman he was, quote, in with the police department, unquote. Shorman advised it was common knowledge that Ruby had been arrested for carrying a concealed weapon, but it was also common knowledge that Ruby still carried a .38 caliber revolver, although Shorman did not see Ruby with any weapons. Ruby never gave any indication of being pro-communist or pro-American. His interests were entirely limited to making money. He was never heard to make mention of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, nor did Shorman ever hear of Lee Harvey Oswald during that period. All right, radical or extremist views. Ruby appeared to have no more or less the attitude of most individuals in his class and locale for Negroes. He spoke of them in disrespectful terms such as, quote, spooks, spades, and niggers, unquote, and refused on one occasion, observed by Shorman, to admit to the carousel a mixed group of Negro and white businessmen. However, Shorman never heard Ruby explicitly express hatred or use any inflammatory remarks concerning Negroes, close relatives, and associates of Ruby. Shorman did not know Ruby's family other than to hear Ruby state that his father was past 80 years. Ruby stated that he had several brothers and sisters, and one brother, name unknown, operated the Vegas club for Ruby elsewhere in Dallas. Ruby was apparently on speaking terms with many apparently affluent individuals who came slumming to the carousel, but apparently had no close friends or associates. Shorman believed Ruby had approximately 50 ex-partners in and around Dallas, and there appeared to be a constant turnover of partners. Shorman broke relations with Ruby when Ruby attempted to get Shorman to invest $6,000 into his business. Shorman advised Ruby played the field and attempted to date various entertainers and waitresses of his establishment who were expected to mingle with the guests, doubling as B-girls, but had no apparent lasting interest in this regard. Shorman characterized Ruby as a Jekyll and Hyde personality, affable and genial when it served his purpose, but apt to fly into a rage at the most insignificant remark or happening. Shorman stated that Ruby was a show-off who would often attract attention to himself by artificial loud laughter and by impromptu injecting of himself into the floor show. Ruby apparently prided himself on the fact that he did not drink or smoke. Ruby had more than a passing interest in gambling and bet heavily, made frequent telephone bets on horse races and basketball games. Ruby was from time to time sloppy and very careless in his dress and tended to show more consideration for animals than people. Ruby allegedly had 3 dogs. Ruby, on any occasion, never showed interest in politics, national or international, and never gave any indication of having even a passing interest in religion. Shorman stated that as far as he could tell, Ruby's only goal in life was in making money, although he never appeared to have a surplus of this. November 29, 63. From SAC, New York. Reference Jack Ruby. Ralph Paul, associate of Ruby. For info of Washington field office, retail requested NYO to review insurance records, NYC. That would establish Paul's citizenship. Pertinent portion of retail is as follows. Investigation Dallas established one Ralph Paul, a.k.a. Raphael Paul, is admittedly closet personal friend in Dallas of Jack Ruby. Paul, white male, born Kiev, Russia, December 17th, 1899, and presently operates a drive-in restaurant in Arlington, Texas, came to Dallas December 27, 47 from New York City, where he was the owner of Ralph's Fruit Exchange, 161st Street between Walton and Girard, Bronx, New York. Operated this business 20 years and prior thereto until 1927 has engaged with father in Paul's Fruit Exchange, 159th Street, New York. While in New York, resided 1152 College, Bronx, New York, 1922 to December 1947. Paul claims entered U.S. with father 1901 or 2, with mother following in 1907 or 8. States obtained derivative citizenship through naturalization of parents. Parents are Samuel Paul, deceased, and Tilly Paul, currently residing 2265 Sedgwick, New York. David Paul, address unknown, lives in the Bronx, operates a parking lot. Louis Paul, address unknown, reportedly employed as salesman of women's belts, who formerly operated Pleasant Finance Company, 25 Main Street in Lodi, New Jersey. Sister Lee Paul Berry, 2565 Sedgwick. Cousin Mac Paul, address unknown, employed grocery clerk, Bronx, New York. Paul states formerly married to one Beatrice Shull, 1931, now remarried, name address unknown, residing in Manhattan. Paul admits hold 50% of stock in S&R Inc., Texas Corporation, owner of Carousel Club, operated by Jack Ruby. Dallas indices negative on Paul and relatives. Redacted States Records Administration section INS New York on 11/29 instant advised that check of INS Records NYC failed to reflect record of Ralph Paul, a.k.a. Raphael Paul, or his parents Samuel Paul and Tilly Paul. Pointed out that all INS records involving naturalization or derivative citizenship prior to 4/1/56 are now located INS Central Office, Washington, D.C. New York is checking records of a U.S. District Court, SDNY and EDNY, in effort to locate naturalization efforts of Paul and his parents. Washington Field Office review INS Central Office, and if located records for Paul or his parents, advise the New York office. All right, next one, 11/29. Retail requested interview with Irving Mazzei, Mazzei, American Guild of Variety Artists, AGVA, at New York City. Hal Keenan, AGVA, New York City, on 11/29 instant, advised that Mazzei is former employee of AGVA and last known address is 12231, looks like Nesby Avenue in Hollywood. LA, please interview Mazzei. Next one, 11/29, Tampa to Dallas, Chicago, and Phoenix. Reference hoodlum connections. Investigation conducted November 26 through November 28, 1963, in efforts to identify, locate, and interview Nate Grossman, a.k.a. Tiny. Nate Grossman, 2036 North Lincoln Park West, Chicago, Illinois, located and interviewed this date by S.A. Robert J. Tompkins, Jr. Grossman advised formerly resided at 5046 North Troy, Chicago, was employed in the past as a cab driver and bartender in the Rush Street area of Chicago. He advised he's not familiar with Jack Ruby. However, when news broadcasts first identified individual who murdered Oswald as Jack Rubenstein from Chicago, he told several people that he was familiar with Rubenstein, however, had mistakenly identified him as Harry Rubenstein, who formerly operated several striptease joints in Chicago. Grossman advised he's familiar with a number of Chicago hoodlums and has heard no information regarding Jack Ruby as being associated. Phoenix discontinue efforts to locate Grossman. 11/29 family background. Records VA Research Hospital, 333 East Huron Street, Chicago, as pertaining to the brother of Jack Ruby, Earl Ruby. Reviewed this date by S.A. Vernon Jossie. Records reflect Ruby admitted to this hospital on August 10th, 60. Absented himself without leave on August 1960. Diagnosis was depressive reaction acute, and upon discharge was shown as treated and improved. Copies of all records pertaining to Earl Ruby being forwarded. All right. Jack Leon Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald. Civil rights, re Waco telephone numbers. Re Dallas telephone number 28 last. Investigation by William Buckler. Waco telephone number PL2-7365 listed to Irene Ward, 1916 Bernard, Waco, Texas. Waco PD records reflect Ward's full name as Irene Zascoda, Zascoda Ward, and description white female, date of birth December 17, 31, 5 foot 7 inches, 1 to 5 pounds, but show only one traffic ticket. Credit records Waco indicated. Ward's occupation is waitress. Ward left Waco August 15 last, leaving forwarding address of ARP 145 Skyline Apartments, Grand Prairie, Texas. Waco telephone number SW9-2770 listed to Falcon Club, a Waco nightclub. Investigation at club indicates Ruby not known, but developed information that Ward employed there as waitress from about May to August 63. SA indicates negative on Ward. Dallas at Grand Prairie, locate and interview Ward, reference Ruby. Letterhead memo and 302s to follow. All right. Background info, read Jack Ruby, Textile Workers of America. The 1961 Directory of Labor Organizations in New York State, issued by New York State Department of Labor. Division of Research and Statistics on page 27 reflects that Jack Rubenstein is the director of the regional office, Textile Workers Union, 1999 University Place, New York, New York. S.A. Dennis O'Sullivan made a pretext call, 11/29 instant, to Oregon 31400, which is listed to the above organization, and spoke with a woman who said that she was a secretary to Jack Rubenstein, director. Said Mr. Rubenstein's on vacation, will not return until before 12:15 next. Pretext used was that caller had an employment problem and wanted to speak to Jack Rubenstein personally. This appears to verify that Jack Rubenstein, Textile Workers Union of America, is not identical with subject. Dallas requested to furnish photos of subject to New York, copies sent by mail to Chicago, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and it cuts off there. All right. Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, redacted reporter, redacted Sun-Times newspaper, Chicago, confidently advised one of his reporters received information from a confidential source, presumably a long-distance telephone operator, to the effect during the night a call was received from Havana, Cuba to Peoria, Illinois, 674-8733. This call was misdirected to Orchard 48733, Skokie, Illinois. However, misdirection detected and call rerouted to Peoria when Havana reportedly asked for individual named Rubenstein. Not known whether this may be pertinent, however, in view of Oswald's connection with Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Springfield should discreetly determine holder of Peoria 674-8733 and evaluate whether this incident may be pertinent to captioned matter. Handle immediately in Sutel Bureau, Dallas, and Chicago. So one thing you can tell by a lot of these documents we're going over is that these guys got sent in a lot of fucking random directions, right? Seemingly it had nothing to do with Jack Ruby, or if they did, it was just people who knew Jack Ruby incidentally in a passing nature some years ago, completely irrelevant to the assassination. But see, what they're doing is they're putting together a biographical sketch, really. When you get all this information, you put together a timeline, you kind of see what Ruby was doing at different points over the years, and that gives you a psychological kind of profile, right? Is this the kind of the guy who would do what he's being accused of? All right, General Investigation Division. This is the case wherein an individual by the name of Miller in Washington, D.C. called up and said Murchison and Tommy Webb were acquainted with Ruby. We've been unable to locate Miller. It appears he gave fictitious address. We have interviewed both Murchison and Webb, and they deny knowing Ruby. All right, 11/26. Assassination of President Kennedy, November 22 last. Bureau Tel. Call this date. First name unknown Miller, 1125 14th Street, Washington, D.C. Stated he was close friend of Ruby, that he's known to Clint Murchison, Dallas, Texas, and Tommy Webb of Washington, D.C., who's associated with Murchison. Clint Murchison Jr. contacted this date, states he never heard of Miller or Ruby, and first time he heard of Ruby was when he saw his name in the newspaper when he shot Lee Harvey Oswald November 24 last. Frank Kiernan, SA, USA, Chicago, on 11/24 last, furnished the following information received from Jack Wilner, crime reporter, quote, Chicago Daily News. Wilner states his syndicate sources reflect Ruby reportedly involved in 1947 with Nick St. John, Paul Labriola, Marcus Lipsky, and Paul Roland Jones in effort to take over gambling in the Dallas area. Also involved were Steve Guthrie, sheriff of the county, and one George Butler. George Butler is Jack Ruby's oldest friend in Dallas, the head of the police union at the time of the assassination. He's the man who let Jack Ruby into the basement, probably 8:30 in the morning on the 24th. Wilner advised information on the situation in Kefauver hearings 1950 and that several individuals were convicted in Dallas in above case. All right, so let me screenshot this because that's super important, right? The Kefauver hearings. Allegedly, Jack Ruby was an informant for Nixon in the Kefauver hearings. Chicago, unable to evaluate above information, requests Dallas furnish verification, if any. Wilner, unavailable for comment. 11/25/63. Miami office has contacted appropriate gambling informants in Miami area, but none of the informants contacted was able to furnish any information regarding Ruby. Correction line 3, blah, blah, blah. All right. Moving on to Jack Ruby, section 2. 11/25/63. Jim Blaylock, Chief Deputy, Wood County SO, Texas, advised that an unknown white female, 30 to 35 years of age, light red hair, driving 62 or 63 bronze Cadillac Sports Coupe, bearing 63 Louisiana license 941985, stopped for gasoline at Smith Humble Service Station, Hawkins, Texas, approximately 1:30 p.m. on this date. The woman made 3 long-distance calls to Dallas. She talked considerably about shooting and remarked she knew the, quote, SOB who was going to shoot him. She did not appear to be drunk, but talked incessantly and then drove off in the direction of Dallas. DPS, Tyler, Texas, advised Cadillac convertible, registered to Jeanette Conforto. That's Jada. 627 and 1/2 St. Peters, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans will attempt to locate whereabouts of Conforto and interview her concerning remark made by her. Should it be ascertained that she is presently in Dallas, attempt to learn her whereabouts in Dallas. So at the time of the assassination, she was living in New Orleans. So what date was this? This was on the November 25th. And she was in Texas. Looked like she was on her way to Dallas. Okay. So that was after the assassination, because on the day of the assassination, she was on her way back to New Orleans, where she got in the fender bender in Dallas. Jack Leon Ruby, a.k.a. Lee Harvey Oswald, victim. Bureau phone call today concerning anonymous phone call received by Washington field office alleging Jack Rubenstein, brother was from Detroit, was in Washington, heavily armed, may try to kill someone. Immediate efforts to verify Earl Rubenstein's whereabouts through contact with members of the family, Chicago, met with negative results as they declined to be interviewed in person or on the telephone. SAC Detroit telephonically advised SAC Chicago that at 12:30 p.m. today, Chief of Police, Southfield, Michigan, advised him that Earl had returned home and requested that Southfield PD furnish police guard at residence. Detroit is immediately interviewing Earl Rubenstein to positively establish his whereabouts and attempt to obtain additional information concerning background. Rubenstein family included identity of all immediate relatives of subject. Detroit will telephonically contact Bureau as soon as Earl Rubenstein has been observed by agents to be at his residence. November 26th. Frank Butch Loverde, Loverde, Laverde, maybe, advised SAS William Meinke, Meincke, and Joseph G. Shea on November 25, 1963, that he does not know the subject. Laverde said that had the subject been connected in any way with the organized criminal element of Chicago, he would have some knowledge of Ruby. Laverde advised that many people in Chicago have confused the subject with Harry Rubenstein, an individual who formerly operated the Olympic Hotel and killed a man in 1946. He stated that Harry Rubenstein had gotten mixed up with the wrong people and been run out of Chicago. He believed that Harry Rubenstein had gone somewhere in Texas. Laverde declined to elaborate on the above remarks and did not furnish the date or other particulars concerning Harry Rubenstein's trouble. See, it sounds like Harry Rubenstein's biography matches with Jack's, doesn't it? To a degree. Laverde indicated that he believed the agents were questioning him in the mistaken belief that the Oswald killing had some organized crime overtones. He said, look at it our way. It's not logical to send a guy in to hit a guy who stood up for 25 hours. You know, you can... Wait a minute. It's not logical to send in a guy to hit a guy who's stood up for 25 hours. I don't know what that means. You know, you can trust a guy who can stand up for 25 hours, but how do you know you can trust the guy you send in to hit him? He might break in a half hour, unquote. Laverde is active in the management of strip shows on Chicago's North Side and is closely connected with Joseph Caesar DeVarco, a Chicago hoodlum. Manny Gader, Gader, looks like, or Sader, Sader, manager of the 606 Club, a strip show in Chicago, advised SAS Robert Cook and William R. Broderick on November 25, 1963, that he never heard of the subject until he read of him in the newspapers in connection with Instant Case. He did not believe this individual was connected with any criminal element in Chicago. On November 25, 1963, S.A. Robert J. Tompkins, Jr. and Michael G. Simon interviewed Harold Hershey Osher, 8422 Christiana, Skokie, Illinois. He and his brother Seftae, S-E-F-T-A-E, run Thief Flavor Dash Right Corned Beef and Provision Company, Inc. in Chicago. Scher stated he has known the Rubenstein family for many years, having grown up in the same neighborhood. He's well acquainted with the Jaime Rubenstein, Earl Rubenstein, and Eva Grant, brothers and sister of Jack Ruby. He does not know Jack Ruby very well, having only met him casually inasmuch as Jack did not associate with the crowd known to her. He stated that all the Rubenstein family were reputable and well thought of in the community. Jack Ruby was always well dressed and a gentleman as far as his contacts with Scher. Scher stated that he had never heard that any of the family, including Eva Grant, were ever associated in any criminal activity. On November 25, 1963, S.A. Tompkins and Simon interviewed Seftae Scher, 6414 North Claremont, Chicago, Illinois, stated he grew up with the Rubenstein family and he knew Jaime Earl and Eva Grant and another sister whose name he believes to have been Sarah. He recalls Jack Ruby as being a good dresser. However, he could not furnish any information as to Ruby's businesses. He never heard any of the Rubensteins who were well thought of in the community as having been engaged in any criminal activity. All right, now we have an internal memorandum to Mr. Morrell from Daniel Evers, subject Jack Rubenstein, dated November 26th. On Sunday, November 24th, 63, while I was working at J.E. Burchell's Sinclair Service Station, Arlington, Virginia, a Mr. C.H. Payne, P-A-Y-N-E, came in to have a headlight replaced. While we were installing his headlight, an announcement came over the radio that Lee Harvey Oswald had been shot in the Dallas Police Department by Jack Ruby. After the news broadcaster gave the description of Jack Ruby and stated that he was an operator of a dance hall and striptease show, Mr. Payne related that years ago, either in Tucson or Phoenix, he had worked for a man from Chicago who fit the description of Jack Ruby. Mr. Payne also stated that the man he worked for was named Jack Rubenstein, but he did not know if there was ever any connection between Rubenstein and the above-captioned individual. After Mr. Payne had left the station, and an announcement came over the radio that the real name of Jack Ruby was Jack Rubenstein, Mr. Payne's address is 3507 Hilltop Place in Falls Church, Virginia. recommendations for your information. All right. Memo to Director FBI from the Washington Field Office. Background: on November 26 last, Robert D. Johnson, Chief Counsel, Passport Office, Department of State, advised S.A. Kenneth J. Haser, Haser, the National Broadcasting Corporation representative, made telephonic inquiries that date seeking to identify from passport files one Jack Lawrence of Dallas, born about 1939, an alleged associate of subject. Passport files negative. No additional identifying data located. Re Lawrence. If not previously done, Dallas locate and interview Lawrence. Okay, so Jack Lawrence is one of these guys who is suspected to have been in Dealey Plaza, been behind the knoll, escaped through the sewers, and then showed up at work allegedly covered in mud and stuff, having left his vehicle, which was a loaner from the car dealer he worked at, back behind the fence, behind the grassy knoll. So was Jack Lawrence there behind the grassy knoll? It's a good possibility. I haven't really been able to fit him into any of my connections. Allegedly associate of the LA mob. But really, I don't know that the LA mob had people on the ground there in Dealey Plaza. They were definitely waiting in the wings. Other than maybe Brading, right? Eugene Hale Brading. Jim Braden. But he was only a part-timer in Los Angeles. Like, he bounced around a lot. So, it's hard to say. More information needs to be dug up about Jack Lawrence, for sure. All right. Passport files negative. No additional information on Lawrence. Please interview him if you can find him. Next, Jack Ruby's hoodlum connections. S.A. Daniel Addario, Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Philadelphia Today advised S.A. Robert L. Tagg, T-A-G-G. He'd received information from a confidential informant that Cohen, a.k.a. Pigface, operator of used car lot, 40th and Chestnut and 41st and Sampson, Philadelphia, brother of Roy Cohen, C-O-H-E-N, not Roy Cohn, former official Teamsters Union, Philadelphia, had told Addario, apostrophe S, Addario's informant, that he was very frequently with Jack Ruby and knows Ruby from Chicago. Cohen advised informant Ruby tied up with rackets in Chicago. Philadelphia interviewed Cohen regarding his association with Ruby and knowledge of Ruby's rackets. Philadelphia conducted an interview so that information from Federal Bureau of Narcotics informant not be disclosed. (11/27/63) to Director SAC Dallas, Detroit, and Washington. Reference Washington Field Office, November 26, Detroit, Tell Last. North Eaton Street, New Haven. No Earl Ruby or Earl Rubenstein listed New Haven City Directory, 1940. Efforts to date to locate Earl Ruby residing elsewhere in Connecticut in 1940 negative. Detroit advised if Earl Ruby interviewed November 25 last by Detroit agents is brother of Jack Ruby. If so, determine where Earl Ruby resided during summer and fall 1940. If necessary, set out appropriate leads to Chicago to verify residence during that period. CP petitions filed by town in Connecticut and efforts to locate petitions signed by Earl Ruby negative to date. Washington Field requested to furnish New Haven autostat copy of page of petition book bearing name Earl Ruby, Eaton Street. AGR assistance New Haven in positively identifying Earl Ruby, who signed the Communist Party nomination petition. New Haven office indices negative reference Earl Ruby or Earl Rubenstein. So yeah, we've got this communist connection to the Rubenstein family. But is it this Rubenstein family or is it another Rubenstein family? If it is this Rubenstein family, I doubt they were ever really communists, and I bet it was all part of some weird operation of some sort. An informant kind of thing. 11/27, reference Chicago Teletype, November 26th. Background of Joe Kellerman, it says Joe Kellman, but it's probably Kellerman. November 27 instant, Joe Kellman, Kellman, well, it says it twice, so it's probably correct, 2733 West Jarlath Street, Chicago, advised S.A. Rufus H. Powell he was in Durham, North Carolina, undergoing tests at Duke Hospital. About 1943, he met Jack Rubenstein through his brother, Maury Kellman, and cousin Artie Weiner, a.k.a. Artie Wayne, in Chicago, Illinois. Altogether, he saw Rubenstein 5 or 6 times socially. He remembered Rubenstein as a health faddist, and Kellman exercised with him once at Post's Gym in downtown Chicago. Kellman was not certain, but said he thought Rubenstein worked as a jeweler at a place Kellman could not remember. Kellman never knew him to be connected with a nightclub profession, remembered him as such a mild-mannered person that the idea of his connection at any time with any Chicago mobster or Capone group appeared preposterous. Kellman said he never knew Rubenstein's sister Eva Grant or relatives, nor had he heard anything at all from Rubenstein or other sources. Kellman was not aware that Rubenstein had left Chicago until he recognized a full photograph of Rubenstein when he was identified as Oswald's assailant. He never heard anything to indicate Rubenstein had possibly been connected with hoodlum elements. Kellman knew of no groups, organizations, or associates of Rubenstein's. Said he never heard of Oswald until the president's assassination. Kellman advised Rubenstein had appeared to him to be a quiet, well-mannered, almost effeminate type of man who lisped. The idea that he could become a strong-armed bouncer and an affiliate of gangsters was totally at odds with the impression Kellman said he formed of Rubenstein 20 years ago. Kellman offered any additional assistance he might provide the investigation to Chicago. See, this contradictory information on what Ruby's personality type was like. It keeps coming up from different people that he had 2 very different personality types. Now, was he split personality, or are we describing 2 different people here? 1128. Cincinnati teletype, reference Jack Ruby. Sonia Jaffe, Jaffe, 7301 Harding Avenue, Miami Beach, today advised. She and husband Sam reside in Muncie, Indiana, 41 to 56. Said she does not know Jack Ruby by any name and never heard him mentioned by any of her family. Does not know George Fehrenbach. States Sam Jaffe belonged to no organization she knows of. Believe Max Pritzker belonged to an anti-defamation league in Muncie, but knows nothing of any alleged associations of Ruby and Pritzker. All right, here we go. More communist stuff. Reference Dallas teletype, Chicago teletype, 1127 last. Alleged communist activities. Unsub, possibly Jack Rubenstein, who allegedly traveled to Muncie, Indiana, in company of son-in-law of Sam Jaffe in early 40s and possibly in 1946 or 7. Seymour Chazin, Chazin, 105 West Adams, Chicago, interviewed this date by SAS Robert A. Villemure and Avery Dacus, Dacus, and advised he's the son-in-law of Sam Jaffe. Chazin stated subject Jack Rubenstein unknown to him and that he has no knowledge of any Communist Party meetings being held in Muncie during the 40s, at no time ever accompanied any group from Chicago to a meeting in Muncie. He said only son-in-law of Jaffe, who may have brought a group from Chicago to Muncie, is now living in Los Angeles. This son-in-law's present name is Erwin Burke, Berke. However, because of his show business affiliations, he changed his name from Erwin Burkstead. Chicago indices on Erwin Burkstead and Erwin Burke negative. Following confidential informants active in Communist Party in 30s and 40s were exhibited photos of Jack Rubenstein this date and advised individual unknown to them as active in the Communist Party. Los Angeles, please handle interview of Burke as requested. Chicago teletype. This completes Chicago phase of investigation to identify and interview sons-in-law of Sam Jaffe. All right, November 30th, 63, teletype to SAC Dallas from Director FBI, Jack Ruby, a.k.a. Lee Harvey Oswald, a.k.a. Dash Victim Civil Rights. In connection with the civil rights aspects of this investigation, close daily liaison is to be maintained with the police department to ensure that the Bureau will be immediately advised if the police department investigation develops any information as to how Ruby gained admission to the basement on November 24. Any indication that any person conspired with Ruby or that any police officer or other person having color of law conspired with Ruby or willfully permitted the shooting or evidence of any connection between Ruby and Oswald. Possibility of any connection between Ruby and Oswald should also be explored in all pertinent interviews conducted by Bureau agents. All right, 11/30/63. Review of all tells from Chicago and caption case completed. Set out below are names of interviewing agents and or dates where missing or where needed to clarify these tells. All of below tells went to Bureau, and Dallas will be set out by date, time sent, and name of person interviewed, followed by either name of agent or date of interview or both. Read tell November 24, 7:48 p.m. interview of David Byron, conducted by S.A. Richard G. Byers on November 24th. Retell November 24th, 11:22 p.m. interview of John Marcus, conducted by S.A. Daniel P. Blake on November 24. I wonder who these people are. Retell November 25, 7:09 p.m. interview Sausa Frank Kiernan, conducted by S. ASAC William B. Welty, WLTA. Let me see. I'm just going to list off the names of the people. Sausa Frank Kieran. Then we have interview of Departmental Attorney Robert D. Peliquin. Interview of Sandy Smith. Interview of Mrs. Marion Carroll. Doesn't say who these people are, but these are the names presented. Interview of Sherwin Jack Braun. Interview of Milton Ruthstein. An interview of Robert Festenstein. Let me see. Maury Kelman, Tony Weitzel, Louis Kuttner, Jim Casey. These are all associates of people who they assumed or were hoping to find out if they were associates of Ruby, mostly in Chicago. Theodore Schulman, Mike Nemzin, Maishi Bear, Jack Phillips, Henry Becker, Samuel Drexler, Gladys Kearns, James Allegretti, and Art Patak, Petaque, Erwin Horowitz. Erwin Horowitz. He might be the guy associated with the Horowitz Theater. All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up today. Thank you for tuning in. I will be back tomorrow. So, guys, I have a ton of books in. If you're interested in an autographed book, please hit me up, either through email or on Telegram. They're $50 signed and shipped domestically. Also, if you have not yet signed up for or subscribed to my Substack, bloodyhistory.substack.com, it's pretty fucking wild. It's all things World War II. Everyone who's been subscribing seems to really like it. So, but that's going to do it for me, guys. I will talk to y'all tomorrow.